NASCAR has concluded its two-day test from the Charlotte Motor Speedway, and let's just say skepticism has creeped into the minds of NASCAR fans regarding the future of its newest car. Yo, what is up everyone? My name is Jeff Krause and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Lines. Don't forget, before we jump into today's episode, if you haven't already, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content. Today's going to be a quickie episode. Don't know how long it's going to be. I'm not going to drag it out to 10-15 minutes. I'm just going to go over what people are saying and what I'm seeing from the next gen car. So we know that Wednesday was a test from the Charlotte Motor Speedway on the oval, and what's important about this test is that for the first time ever we saw two of the NASCAR next gen cars on the racetrack with Martin Truex Jr. and Kurt Busch, and we actually got to see them race side by side for a couple laps. Now this test brought a lot of good but also some bad, or at least some skepticism in this test, mainly because of off-throttle time. Now at first in the daytime, we heard some off-throttle time entering into turn number 1. If you haven't seen it already, take a listen. Now I know it might not seem like it, but at least from the person that filmed the video, who was recording right on top of the car at the racetrack, he said that there was off-throttle time when they went into turn number 1. So that's good news. However, at nighttime, when we saw on a single car run with Kurt Busch, or I think it was either Kurt Busch and Martin Truex Jr. by themselves, we heard very little to zero off-throttle time. Take a listen. Now, a lot of people had a feeling this had to do with NASCAR implementing a big spoiler, which I forgot exactly how tall it was. I think it was the 2019 last year's spoiler height in 2020. I forgot exactly the dimensions of it, but I believe that's what they used. And fans did not like it, including Tyler Reddick, who even posted a GIF showing his displeasure for NASCAR using a tall spoiler. And that caused a bit of skepticism on if NASCAR really is understanding what they need to produce good racing. We did see two very important videos. One, a pass in a next gen car, and two, cars racing side by side. We're gonna first show the pass. The pass shows Martin Truex Jr. getting a run off of turn number 4 and getting underneath Kurt Busch side by side before they enter into turn 1. Now, you could take this in many different ways. I'm not going to act like I know everything about stock cars, but this is what I'm going to take from it. Either A, number 1, this is a good sign and shows that there's none of that bubble area, or like how there's like a beach ball between two cars that sort of stalls the car behind its run. That's the issue what we saw with the Gen 6 car, Keying Point, Kansas last year. Kevin Harvick get a run and then his stall would stop. We didn't see that. However, we could also take it in another direction because NASCAR, they're trying to get information. They're trying to get data from all different types of situations. How does a car act from behind? How does a car act when it's in front? And how does a car act from side by side? I won't be surprised if NASCAR maybe got on Kurt and Martin Truex Jr.'s radio and maybe say, hey, Kurt, go to the outside, let Truex Jr. get underneath you, and get side by side and do a few laps for us. That could be a possibility. But it could also be Truex getting just a really good run and having his run not stall out. That is great news. We don't want to see runs get stalled out. That hurts the racing product, and that hurts chances of passing either for position or for the lead. Same thing can be said maybe with this next video. This video shows a full lap of Truex and Kurt Busch racing side by side. Alright, so we're going to go over the race footage. You see Kurt Busch on the inside in the blue sidecar, Truex Jr. on the top side. Now what's interesting about this is that you see Kurt Busch and he's able to hang in there with Truex. He doesn't lose the car like we would see in the Gen 6 car. Kurt Busch is able to get a run back on the inside with the side draft, able to get ahead of Truex. And then what's interesting about this is that even with Truex hanging on Kurt's right rear corner panel, Kurt Busch is still able to pass and actually clear Martin Truex Jr. by the time they make it to the start-finish line. By that clip alone is really, really good news. Another issue we would see is that because aero was so sensitive in the Gen 6 car, it was almost impossible to see two cars race side by side close like that. We've seen cars race side by side, but usually one is up top and one's on the bottom. these two were racing really close to each other, and Kurt really didn't lose the car. He was able to hang in there with Truex and was able to actually pass him for the lead, or for position. Another thing you can hear from that is off-throttle time. Now, when those two cars were racing side by side, you could hear just slightly before they enter into turn one, you heard them get off the throttle. Again, we like to see that. We don't want to see drivers go full throttle the entire time. Now, one thing we do need to point out is number one, is this, because this is a different video. The first bit that I showed you when Truex passed Kurt Busch, that was a different video. We don't know, first of all, number one, how long they've been on the racetrack, if they just got a brand new set of tires, or if this is after a long green flag run. We don't know yet how long the runs were when this video was taken. But we did hear Christian Espinoza, who was the guy that took those videos, and again, he is sitting right on top of the cars on the racetrack. So we can rely on him knowing if we can, we're going with off-throttle timing, how does the car sound, and things like that. And he said in his tweet, the next gen test session is done. The car has a lot more promise than I thought beforehand. It sounds great, looks good, and it was really good to hear some off-throttle time every now and then entering the turns. Now, the every now and then part kind of concerns me. I mean, I think maybe at the start of a green flag run, yeah, okay, it's understandable, but as the run goes on, we should be hearing off throttle every lap, not every now and then. Like some laps you can go full throttle, some laps you let off the gas. I don't know. I'm probably just nitpicking it, but I think it's weird to have every now and then a car go off the throttle entering the corner. Now, John Probst, who is the vice president of racing competition or racing innovation of NASCAR, was there for the next gen test at Charlotte, and he talked about on how actually that the test at the oval, well, they weren't impressed with it. At least the drivers weren't impressed with it. Feedback today, frankly, wasn't as good as it was on the road course. We collected a significant amount of data from the last 3 days that we'll start going through at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning at the R&D Center. We'll figure out what modifications we need to make. We'll enlist the help of our OEMs and teams to help us make the right decisions here as we finalize the design of this car in the next few months. And I like that NASCAR said that. They admit, hey, this test session wasn't as good as we wanted it to be. And that is good. One thing I've always hated with NASCAR, and they still kind of do it to this day, is the everything looks good. From what we see, everything is fine. No, sometimes things don't look fine. And I like that they admit that, hey, not everything is all handy-dandy, not everything is all, rainbows and roses, or whatever synonym or phrase you want to use. And I think for a session like this on the intermediate tracks, when it's basically the bread and butter of NASCAR and the biggest problem with the current car, the Gen 6 car, I think it's good to have veteran drivers like Kurt Busch and Mark Truex Jr. Do the test, because they understand what it's like to have a car that can race well. Again, they raced during the Gen 4 era, Gen 5 era. They've raced through all different types of cars, so they can have a feeling which car is good and what parts aren't good. And that's what John Probst discussed in this article on having and why it's so important to have two past champions like Kurt Busch and Mark Truex Jr. do these tests. He said, anytime you get the opportunity to have somebody like Kurt and Martin in the car, veterans have driven not just the current car, but previous generations, to provide a good historical perspective for you. When you bring out a new model with a car of the complexity that we're working on today, there is a whole mental shift that has to happen in regards to what changes are important and to how the car handles. It's always good when you can get veterans in the car that you can use as a guidepost to keep you going in the right direction. They did a phenomenal job for us. We couldn't ask for anything more. As for when the next gen test will take place, John Probst said that it will take place in Daytona. Next up for us is to bring the P3 car to Daytona International Speedway on December 15th and 16th. It will be single car runs, which will be important as we start to tune in the drag and power levels we're going to need to run the speeds we want to run there. Beyond that, we're working on a tire test plan with Goodyear right now that will likely have 7 or 8 tests for 2021. The OEMs are currently wrapping up the builds for their own vehicles, and we will look to start wheel force transducer testing in March with all 3 cars on the track. Now, if you don't know what wheel force transducers are, I don't blame you. According to a Morehouse.com website article, it says here that wheel force transducers are mounted in and around the wheels. These transducers measure vertical and lateral load. They also can measure the camber and slip angle on the track. Force sensors are also critical when mounted due to the fact that the forces measured generate to the tire and wheel. The more direct contact of the tire to the track translates to greater speed. Now, like I said, there's a lot of positives with this, but there's also some skepticism. Like I said, with the every now and then off-throttle time, with the giant rear spoilers, you have to keep in mind, it's November 2020. The car doesn't arrive until February 2022. We have more than a year until the next gen car comes out on track to make its debut. And again, we saw what John Propp said, the fact that, hey, this test wasn't as good as we want it to be. We take that feedback, we go to the R&D center. We have seen changes with generations of cars over time. Look back earlier in the year, or last year I believe, when Austin Dillon tested at Richmond. The car, it might not look different at first, but when you start to look into the curves and how the car looks and size and things like that, it looks kind of different from the Richmond test compared to the Charlotte test. It looks pretty different. Now I want to play a clip. This is coming from Kurt Busch's car in the next gen test with him and Mark Truex Jr. We're going to play the full clip. Take a listen. So that clip showed Kurt Busch off throttle. You could hear there was off throttle, especially in turns 3 and 4. You could hear it get out the gas a little bit, back on the throttle. You heard a little bit of lifting even when he was back on the throttle. You heard it go duh duh duh. It wasn't like as soon as he let out the gas, got back on it, it was full throttle all the way. You heard a little bit of lifting even after the initial let out the gas entering the corner. Well, that's good. How again. You still heard a lot more lifting than we wanted to. But again, we also take into consideration, we don't know if this was in a 3-lap or 4-lap run where usually you would see guys even during, like you'll see in the 2014 package, you would see them go full throttle or at least go almost full throttle for at least the first 2 or 3 laps. So we don't know if it was taken at the start of the run or if this is after a 20 or 25 lap run. We don't know. And also you heard Kurt Busch, even on the straightaway in the front stretch, you heard him let off the gas. It looks like he wanted to stay side by side with Mark Truex Jr., which again, this is a test. I'm pretty sure NASCAR instructed them to stay side by side, just because we wanted to get as much data as we can. I already know when you go into the comments under that video, they were saying, where is the off throttle? Where is the lifting? I don't hear any lifting. Oh, so much for lifting. And it's like, guys, it's a test, all right? I know I'm skeptical. Don't get me wrong, I'm skeptical. But again, this is a test. They have done tests where they ran the small spoilers. Again, go back to Phoenix. They did tests when they used a big spoiler and ran tests when they used a small spoiler. That doesn't mean it's the final product. Again, we are more than a year away. And the feedback said it was not. The feedback was not that good. So I'm pretty sure they're going to take that and go back to the R&D center today at 8 a.m. and see what they can do to fix it, make some changes to make the car better. And also, you could say, well, why are they using giant spoilers? They're just testing things out. Again, look at Phoenix, for example. In Phoenix, they use a big spoiler and a tiny spoiler. They're just testing things out. How does the car feels in this situation at this track and whatever. They're just trying to get as much data as they can for different situations before they figure out what is best for the next gen car. I mean, if you want more examples on how generations of cars change during testing, look at the Gen 5 car. We know what it looks like in the final product, but this is what it looked like during testing. Here's Daytona, January 2006. Look at that white car. That looks nothing like the car that we see nowadays. Even look at the bottom car, how the wing looks a lot different, or looks kind of different than the car that we saw in the final product. Another example is this test. This test was a Gen 5 car, and they used a spoiler. It was a different spoiler. You can see a little bit of a curve near the end in the gray Hendrick car, but we've seen testing in new generations of cars change over time, because they're just testing things out and finding out what's best for the product. So when I see people jumping the gun and saying, "Oh wow, no off throttle time. Oh my God, they're using big spoilers." That could be the case. Like they could be going with a big spoiler in the final product in 2022. But I think we need to take a step back and realize that we're still more than a year away from final testing, and especially when we don't even have the cars like actually made. We don't have a Chevy made next gen car, or a Ford or a Toyota. Once we see more than 3 cars on the racetrack, which we will see in 2021, and get Goodyear to come in with more tire tests and things like that, then we can start to get an idea of what this car might do when it comes to race time in 2022. But right now, I'm enjoying it. I like what I see from the next gen car. Yes, there are some things I don't like, I'm a bit skeptical of, but I'm still holding up hope. I'm still optimistic. Now, overall, that's very much I have to say for this episode of Inside the Lines. It was pretty cool to see finally the next gen car in action, I guess you could say, with another car on racetrack, but I'm really looking forward to see what do the manufacturer made next gen cars look like, and how they race in 2021 when they do more testing with more cars on the racetrack. But that's going to conclude this episode of Inside the Lines. Guys, tell me in the comment section down below, what are your thoughts so far on the next gen car? Are you happy with what you see? Are you still skeptical, optimistic? What are your thoughts so far on the next gen car? And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content. But until next time, my name is JettMDK, and I'll see you guys next time.